We survived week 11. We didn't survive it because it was such a great weekend of college football. We didn't survive it because there were so many major upsets and fantastic games. We survived it because in just 1 week, we saw COVID-19 impact the college football world more than it has all season long. We saw 15 games get postponed or canceled in week 11. 4 of those coming out of the SEC. 15 games. I mean, these games started to get canceled and postponed the Sunday prior, a full week ago, and they slowly continue to accumulate over the week. It's one of the worst things we've seen all year, but yet college football continued to power through. We survived it, and we hope and we pray that we won't have to deal with another major outbreak like this. We hope and we pray that these teams can recover and get back to normal as we continue to progress and continue to get near the end of this regular season. But we got through week 11. It was going to be a lackluster week before the postponements. Those just added to it. But we still have a couple key games and moments that we do want to address. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, breaking down our week 11 recap, highlighting the biggest moments and highlighting how we did across the board with our predictions. Let's go ahead and start there before we transfer over to the game action. If you look at our record in week 11, we went 16-6 straight up. Not one of our better weeks, but still well above 70%, 72.7% up there. That brings our overall to 161-49. We've predicted 210 games this year so far, and we've correctly predicted 161 of them. That's a 76.7% winning percentage. If you guys know us, if you've been here for a while, you know that 76% is always the goal, and we feel very confident that we will finish there by season's end. Against the spread, breaking even this week. You know, look, in a week like this, I'm thrilled to break even. We had a lot of games that we were looking at and planned on using for our expert picks that we had to quickly change and quickly go find another game to replace it with as these games continued to get postponed or canceled. So a lot of those kind of threw us for a loop. Some of the games that we picked, we didn't want to pick originally, but we felt they were the best bets, all things considered. So 5-5, we'll happily take it. A couple teams didn't come through with us like we wanted them to, but it is what it is. Fact of the matter is, we still have one of the best records in the entire country. There's no doubt about it. There's no disputing it. The numbers speak for themselves. 54-48 against the spread on the year. 8-2 last week. 5-5 this week. Still hitting over 60% of our bets in the past 5 weeks. So we're still staying very, very hot. And that brings our total to 52.9%. We promised you we'd hit 53% by season's end. We're holding to that, and we're right about at that mark right now. So a solid week all in all things considered. Let's go ahead and take a look at the game action. Let's start on Saturday. We're going to skip the Thursday action. I know there was some great midweek action. The Western Michigan fake spike to take down Toledo. Cincinnati taking down East Carolina, kind of forming a new rivalry there on Friday night, running up the score there a little bit towards the end. Luke Fickell and Mike Houston having a little words at the end. But we're not going to touch on those. Let's start in Blacksburg, where number 9 Miami escaped again for the second straight week. They escaped an ACC opponent, this time against Virginia Tech, defeating the Hokies 25-24. Last week, Miami played North Carolina State. They trailed by, I believe it was 10 in that game. 10 in that game in the fourth quarter before coming back to win by 3. Against Virginia Tech, they trailed by 11 in the second quarter. They trailed by 11 late in the third quarter. So twice they were trailing by double digits. And yet the Hurricanes came back and won. They scored the final 12 points in that game. Scored a game-winning touchdown from De'Aaron King to Mark Pope with 5 minutes and 59 seconds remaining. And what's more impressive about this, if you look at this and you don't know anything, you'd say, they're the number 9 team in the country. Virginia Tech, they were 4-3? They just came off a loss to Liberty. Miami only beat them by 1 point? Well, Miami was in this game and played this game without 14 players. COVID-19. Gotta love it. 14 players Miami did not have, a good number of them being starters. Yet the Hurricanes and Manny Diaz overcame that, found a way to win. De'Aaron King making the plays, Cameron Harris making some plays. And the offensive line, while they did allow 6 sacks in this game, a lot of the offensive linemen missed this game due to COVID-19. While I did allow 6 sacks, Miami had 6 sacks of their own, and the defense came through with a clutch stop in the final seconds. And the Hurricanes, still just a one-loss team, still in the mix for an ACC championship berth, although it most likely will be Notre Dame and Clemson. But the Hurricanes still remaining a top 10 team. And I think this win, with all the players missing, I think that really shows how good of a team and how much Miami has really turned around in year 2 under Manny Diaz. So the Hurricanes, looking very strong, should remain strong going into next week as they take on a struggling Georgia Tech program. A struggling but improving Georgia Tech program. Also on Saturday, real quick, number 10 Indiana. I got to talk about my Hoosiers here. I'm no Indiana fan. I have no affiliation with Indiana, but they are probably one of the best stories in all of college football in 2020. They just shut out Michigan State on the road 24-0. And that is going to set up a top 10 showdown next weekend against Ohio State. A game that will decide, more than likely, decide the Big Ten East. If you had told me, again, a few weeks ago, a few months ago, hey, Indiana, Ohio State, the winner of that's going to win the division, I would not have believed you. I would have said, no, Ohio State, Penn State's going to do that. Ohio State, Michigan's going to do that. And here we are with Michigan and Penn State both sitting at the bottom of the Big Ten East standings. Ohio State, Indiana, this Hoosiers team's for real. Their defense is what impresses me the most. They held the Spartans to 191 total yards. They forced 4 turnovers in this game. The pass rush is legit. The secondary is legit. And the offense really has taken a major step forward. Michael Penix playing extremely well. And the guy that impressed me the most against Michigan State was Ty Freifogel. 11 receptions, 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This Indiana team is for real. They very well could be, and probably are, Ohio State's biggest test in the regular season. That game's going to be played next week, and that's going to be a must-see game for everybody. A game that's going to be very, very close and very, very competitive. So Indiana, shutout win over Michigan State. Anytime you can shut out an opponent, it's very impressive. Shows you're a good team, and the Hoosiers are doing just that, proving they deserve to be in the top 10. Sticking in the Big Ten, this was not necessarily a marquee matchup, but we've got to note it here. Penn State, they just dropped to 0-4. The Nittany Lions, the team that started 2020 at number 8 in the country, at least their season, they started number 8 in the country. A team that many thought were playoff contenders, a team that many thought when they played Ohio State, that would be the game that would determine the East. They're 0-4. They just failed Nebraska on the road, 30-23. And Nebraska, congratulations on your victory. But I'm sure many Huskers fans know there's nothing really to brag about here. This Penn State team is struggling, and this is technically Scott Frost's signature win. This might arguably be his best win during his time at Nebraska, and it came against a winless Penn State program. So both programs have a ways to go. Nebraska is still trying to work their way up because they were winless coming into this game as well. But Penn State, the sad thing is, they're 0-4. They have outgained 3 of their 4 opponents. The only team they did not outgain when it came to yardage was Ohio State. Outgained Indiana. Outgained by 277 yards, actually. They outgained Nebraska by 203 yards. Yet they still are losing these games. And say what you want. Say it's because of COVID. Say it's because you lost Journey Brown and Noah Cain and Micah Parsons didn't come back. Maybe so. Those obviously aren't things that you want to happen. Those obviously aren't things that are going to help your football team. But Penn State should have enough talent by now. They should have enough coaches and experience. James Franklin, I once thought, was one of the better coaches in the Big Ten. He's not proving that to me right now. You should find a way to win. Not every game. I'm not saying you had to beat Ohio State. But Nebraska? Really? Maryland at home? Really? It's just not acceptable for the Nittany Lions, who are now dropped to 0-4. I believe their worst start since 2001, if I'm not mistaken. And just across the board, it is a complete dumpster fire for the Nittany Lions. A lost season for them, and their remaining schedule goes like this. Iowa, a team that's improving, at Michigan, at Rutgers, and Michigan State. Best Penn State can do is finish 4-4. Best they can do is finish at 500, and I've got a very good feeling that's not going to happen. So the Nittany Lions are up to 0-4. Nebraska finally getting in the win column. Maybe that's going to be the spark that Nebraska and the Cornhuskers needed to finally turn things around and maybe somewhat salvage this season under Scott Frost. Another game that wasn't necessarily a marquee matchup. Again, there really weren't many. In Week 11. But how about North Carolina and Wake Forest? If you like offense, if you love offense, this was the game for you. And I hope you were able to watch this game in the ACC. North Carolina is one of those teams that has been wildly inconsistent this year. Remember at one point they were number 5 in the country. They were the 5th ranked team in the country. They fell to Florida State. They were slowly working their way back up the rankings, and they lost to Virginia. What were they at that point? 1-4 team? So, in Virginia, a team we have trending up. We'll touch on in a second. But this North Carolina team has been up and down, and it looked like they were in for another letdown when they trailed by 21 points with under 5 minutes remaining in the third quarter to Wake Forest. 21 points with less than a quarter and a half remaining. After that, Sam Howell led the Tar Heels to 35 unanswered points, and they defeated the Demon Deacons 59-53. This was a game that featured 1,348 yards of offense, obviously very high scoring. 979 of those 1,300 plus yards came through the air. 550 of those yards came from Sam Howell alone, who had 6 touchdown passes. So Sam Howell and North Carolina, they're showing us they're for real in terms of their offense. They're showing us they have the offensive capability to win in a shootout and to put some points and some yards on you. The defense, to me, still needs a little work. Decision-making still needs a little work. But this North Carolina team, I think on any given day, could beat most teams in the ACC. Not all, but most. And they're going to have a great opportunity to prove that to us on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, when they host Notre Dame. They get a week off. So do the Fighting Irish. Each team gets a week off this upcoming week. And then on the 27th of November, they will face off. And that's a game that Notre Dame has to be careful for. One that's certainly going to test this Notre Dame defense. This North Carolina offense will certainly test this Notre Dame defense. So something you want to watch out for as we go through these weeks, as we near the end of the season. But what a game between the Tar Heels and the Demon Deacons. One that certainly seemed to be over late in the third, but you can never count out the MAC. Speaking of Notre Dame, we mentioned how big of a matchup that's going to be here in a few weeks. Notre Dame had a game in Chestnut Hill against Boston College. The Fighting Irish, the newly named number 2 team in the country, following their win over Clemson, who was then the top-ranked team, that 47-40 double overtime thriller. To me, the game of the year, undisputed. I'd love to see a game come along and try to beat that and top that. But Notre Dame, they were number 2 in the country, and a lot of people thought they could slip up against Boston College, a team that was 5-3, a game that featured Phil Jurkovec, the former Notre Dame quarterback, now the Boston College quarterback, kind of going up against his former team, a bit of a revenge game. So a lot of people thought, you've got to watch out for this game, especially in this letdown position. Notre Dame did not allow that to happen. The Fighting Irish showed up, and that's what impressed me the most. Not that they got the win, but because they won it convincingly for me. They defeated the Eagles 45-31. I know they were down 10-3 early. I know they were down 13-10 early in the second. But they led, the Fighting Irish did, 31-16 at halftime. And then, of course, ultimately won 45-31. They had 557 yards of offense. They were extremely balanced offensively. 283 passing yards, 274 rushing yards. Who was their leading rusher, you might ask? Not Kyron Williams, who stole the show last week against Clemson, but Ian Book. 85 yards and a touchdown on 10 carries. We said in our Boston College and Notre Dame preview, we said Ian Book's going to have to step up in this game. He might be the guy that makes the most plays in this one. And I said, don't be surprised if Ian Book ends up being the leading rusher for Notre Dame, because he's shown us that he does have that dual threat capability. And he did just that. We said that when it appeared that Boston College might be gaining some momentum, that Ian Book was going to make a big play and steal that momentum away. And the momentum would shift, and Notre Dame would pull away. That's exactly what happened. We said the Fighting Irish would win by at least 10. They won by 14. This Notre Dame team looked very, very complete. The offense was sound. The defense was sound. They held Boston College to 85 rushing yards. They forced 2 turnovers. This team showed to me they are elite. The Clemson win wasn't a fluke, and I'm not comparing Clemson and Boston College here. Don't mistake that. But what I am saying is we've seen Notre Dame slip up in games like this in the past, especially after a big win. This does not seem to be the typical Notre Dame team. This, to me, does look like a top 4 team in the country. I know they might have to face off against Clemson again in the ACC championship game, but there's no doubt in my mind that Notre Dame can win that game. The Fighting Irish are for real. Take them seriously. They can compete with anyone in the country. They take down the Eagles 45-31. No letdown game, no upset this time, not even on the red bandana day. Back over to the Big Ten, a big one. Number 23, Northwestern, outlasting Purdue 27-20. We had this game as one of our top 5 games of the week, and I had people ask me, and they said, why? Why is this a big game? Who cares about Northwestern Purdue? Well, remember, because of the 2 games that Wisconsin had canceled and the potential threat of their game against Michigan being canceled, this game between Northwestern and Purdue determined who had the number 1 spot in the Big Ten West standings. And it was a great game. It was a hard-fought battle. We knew it would be low scoring. We knew there would be a lot of defense in this game. We picked Purdue. We missed it. I leaned towards the Boilermakers away. I like their passing attack a little bit more. I like they had home field advantage. They let me down. Northwestern, on the other hand, they didn't disappoint. They showed again that they are legitimate, and they should be taken seriously as Big Ten title contenders. You look at the Northwestern defense. They held Purdue to 2 rushing yards all day. And I know you're taking into account the sack yardage, but 2 rushing yards all day, the Northwestern defense held their own. Aiden O'Connell, the Purdue quarterback, he had to do everything by himself, and he tried. 263 yards and 2 touchdowns for the quarterback. Problem is, Northwestern, if you're shutting down the run that easily, you can hone in on the pass, and that's exactly what they were able to do. Purdue, on the other hand, they couldn't stop Peyton Ramsey. He's had a couple games, but he's just been average all season long. I thought he put together his best performance of the year for the biggest game of the year for Northwestern, at least so far. Ramsey, 212 yards. Remember, the former Indiana quarterback, 212 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game against the Boilermakers. So a huge, huge win for Pat Fitzgerald and the Wildcats. There's a very good chance they could jump into the top 20. Very good chance they could jump into the top 20 when that new AP poll is released. And what's even better is Wisconsin travels to Northwestern this upcoming weekend. And that game, like Ohio State and Indiana, could very well determine who wins the division. So next Saturday, there's a very good chance you're going to know who's going to meet in the Big Ten championship game. The winner of Ohio State, Indiana, and the winner of Northwestern, Wisconsin. I know there's more games left to be played, but these are the 2 games that are going to have the biggest impact on who wins those 2 divisions within the Big Ten. So huge win for the Wildcats. Heartbreaking for Purdue, but still could be in store for a very solid year. 2 great matchups coming your way on Saturday. Over in the Pac-12, number 11, Oregon. Surviving, I would say, Washington State. Why do you say surviving? You look at the score, it was 43-29. Oregon won by 14. Game was a lot closer than that. The Ducks, they trailed 19-7 with 24 seconds remaining in the second quarter. So it looked like Washington State and Nick Rolovich, remember the brand new head coach getting hired away from Hawaii, it looked like the Cougars were going to be leading the Pac-12 heavy favorite by 12 points going into half. Well, Oregon had a very good kickoff return, and then Tyler Shugg hit Jalen Redd on a 57-yard pass, which set up C.J. Verdell's 3-yard touchdown run with just a few seconds remaining in the half, and it was 19-14, just like that. That is where all the momentum shifted in favor of the Ducks. Oregon could have taken the kickoff, knelt it, taken a knee, gone into half down 12, hoped to regroup. They were aggressive, including that touchdown by C.J. Verdell. After that happened, Oregon outscored Washington State 36-10 the remainder of the game. Oregon played extremely well in the second half last week against Stanford. They started off sluggish, ended up winning by 21. Same thing happened here in Pullman. Oregon's first win in Pullman since 2014, I should add. But they started off slow towards the end of the first half, and all of the second half, they were away. Slow start, strong finish. And I guess that's what they say. It doesn't matter how you start. It matters how you finish. And you can definitely say that about the Oregon Ducks. Tyler Shugg, 312 yards and 4 touchdowns on Saturday night. C.J. Verdell, over 100 yards rushing again for the Ducks. This is an Oregon team that, again, is the Pac-12's favorite and the Pac-12's best chance of getting into the college football playoff. Things to work on, sure. They had 3 turnovers. Got to cut down on that. Got to work on the defense a little bit. Jaden DeLora, the freshman quarterback, 321 yards and 2 touchdowns for the Cougars. Future is very bright in Pullman. So yeah, there are things to work on. Season's still early for the Ducks. They got the win. They came back. They battled through, and they won fairly comfortably in the end and that is all that matters. So an impressive showing from Oregon, especially in that second half. 36-10, they outscored them in those final seconds of the first half and all the second. Very, very impressive from Mario Cristobal and the Ducks. 2 games left here on the recap. American Athletic Conference action. The only top 25 team to lose, the only one, was number 19 SMU. Number 19 SMU falling to Tulsa 28-24. If you signed up for our expert picks, you know that we do not like SMU. We didn't pick them this week. For this reason alone. SMU always fails to win the big games, and they always make a game out of one that never should be. If it's an inferior opponent, they let them hang around too long. If it's a big game, they either don't show up or they take a huge lead and allow the other team to crawl back into it. And sometimes you don't even cover. So I feel for the people that took SMU this week. I genuinely do, because the Mustangs, they led 21-0. They led 24-7 at halftime. It looked like the Mustangs were going to roll away in this one. They were going to just roll with it. And then in the second half, they were shut out 21-0 and they lost by 4. Sonny Dykes and the Mustangs, you've got a lot of work to do. We've said it all year long. It's great that you have a good quarterback in Shane Buechele. It's great you can throw the ball far. It's great you can move the ball fast. If you don't have a defense and you can't use some basic common sense when you're on offense, you're not going to win the game. And that's exactly what happened on Saturday night. Tulsa, they went in and made some adjustments. They knew that 17 points was manageable. SMU thought that 17 points won them the game. And the Golden Hurricane held SMU to 200 passing yards, and they got a game-winning interception off of Shane Buechele with 1:29 remaining in the game. This Tulsa team is for real. Their offense was great, but their defense was better. And we knew that. We knew their defense was good after week 1, where they only lost in Stillwater to Oklahoma State 16-7. This game is such a big deal, not just because SMU lost. It's a ranked team. They're going to fall out of the top 25. We know that. This game was such a big deal because Tulsa is now one of 2 undefeated teams remaining in the American Athletic Conference, at least when it comes to conference play. When it comes to American Athletic Conference play, Tulsa is just one of 2 teams undefeated in the conference. It's them and Cincinnati. Cincinnati, the 7th ranked team in the country. Tulsa hosts Cincinnati in the season finale. In a few weeks, Tulsa will host Cincinnati, a game that could be relatively low scoring because both have fantastic defenses. There's a good chance that right after that game, the 2 teams will meet again in the American Athletic Conference Championship game, very similar to what happened last year between Cincinnati and Memphis. But this Tulsa team is for real. They're unbeaten in the conference. I would expect them to stay that way until they play Cincinnati, and then that's going to have major New Year's Six bowl game implications, and for the Bearcats could have playoff implications. So some big news and a potential big game coming your way here in a few weeks if both teams continue to play as well as they are. But a huge win for Tulsa. They needed this one. They've got a win over SMU on their resume now. They've got a win over UCF on their resume now as well. And our last game of the weekend that we want to talk about, you know what it is. The Big Ten annihilation in Ann Arbor. Maybe you could call it the Ann Arbor annihilation. Number 13 Wisconsin taking down Michigan 49-11. Goodbye, Jim Harbaugh. You're done. You are done. The Badgers, Wisconsin, they hadn't played in 22 days. They had a major COVID outbreak a few weeks ago. They'd only played 1 game against a very poor Illinois team who just beat Rutgers this past week, but that's despite the point, outside of the point. They hadn't played in 22 days, but yet they led Michigan 28-0 at the Big House. They led them 28-0 at halftime. That was Michigan's largest halftime deficit at home since Michigan Stadium opened in 1927. Let that sink in. The largest halftime deficit at Michigan Stadium ever since it opened in 1927. I think that right there, that stat alone, I know it's just one half, but that stat alone shows you how bad this Michigan team is, how historically bad this Michigan team is. Graham Mertz, he came back. He had a great debut, collegiate debut against Illinois, came back, threw for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. And you'd say, well, 127 yards, that's not that much. They didn't have to use him. They didn't have to throw with him because just like last year, Wisconsin ran all over Michigan. The Badgers, 341 rushing yards against the Wolverines on 51 attempts. Wisconsin ran the ball 51 times and racked up 341 yards. Michigan only had 47 rushing yards, and Joe Milton threw 2 interceptions as the icing on the cake. I don't know what happened to Michigan. I really don't. It seems like every year they have these sky-high expectations. They expect to beat Ohio State. They expect to contend for a national title berth, even though most of us know that's not going to happen. But they expect that, and they always fall short of their goals. This time they haven't fallen short. They've fallen flat on their face, and they continue to sink into the ground. Michigan, they are arguably the worst team in the Big Ten right now. If not, they're certainly one of them. That game against Penn State might be the one that decides it. The Wolverines are sitting at 1-3 right now. They have a game at Rutgers. They have Penn State, Maryland, and a road game at Ohio State left on their schedule. Like Penn State, the best the Wolverines can do is finish 4-4. And that's probably not going to happen because you can go ahead and mark down that Ohio State game as a loss. The Wolverines, unbelievable what's going on here. Harbaugh is certainly on his way out. Horrible start. You're not going to beat Ohio State. You lost to Michigan State. You lost to Wisconsin. He was already kind of on the hot seat going into this year. He's certainly on it. Maybe the seat has burned completely now. It's unbelievable. Speechless. Stunning, really, what's happened in Ann Arbor within the past few weeks. But all the credit in the world to Paul Chryst and his Badgers for overcoming these COVID obstacles. Didn't even know if they were really going to play this game a few days ago. But they came up, they showed out, and then they have a huge game against Northwestern on Saturday, one that could very well determine who wins the Big Ten West. So an unreal week in college football, guys. I mean, really, it wasn't the most exciting. We knew that. We knew it wasn't going to be. No ranked versus ranked matchups. Only one ranked team lost. So many games were canceled. Some of them are going to be good. Maybe we would have seen more upsets if we hadn't had as many cancellations. But that's the world we're living in now. That's something that we have to prepare ourselves for. It's not going to be the last time that kind of stuff happens. But I credit the remaining schools and I credit the officials for getting the job done, for allowing us to have football this week and allowing the games that were able to be played, allowing them to go on. Some football is always better than none. But real quick, let's take a look at our teams trending up and trending down. Let's start with teams trending down just because Michigan's up there at number 1. We just touched on them. The Wolverines are 1-3. Best they can finish is 4-4, really because they're not going to beat Ohio State. So maybe they beat Rutgers, Penn State, and Maryland. Maybe they beat Rutgers, Penn State, Maryland because they're not beating Ohio State. But I have a feeling they're going to drop one of those 3 that we just mentioned. Jim Harbaugh, he's out. If he sticks around for another year, I don't know what the heck the Michigan administration is doing. I know they're fed up. They're tired. They're tired of coming close. They're tired of waiting till next year. And this year, when a year where they thought maybe we'll be mediocre, maybe we'll hang around top 15, top 20, they've disappointed more than I think they ever have under Jim Harbaugh. It's unbelievable. I think Michigan football has hit a new low this season. I mean, you lose to Indiana by 17. You lose to Wisconsin by 37 or 38. You lose at home to a bad Michigan State team. Things certainly aren't getting better anytime soon. Right below Michigan, Virginia Tech. Hate to have the Hokies up here. I really do. Have a lot of respect for the team out in Blacksburg. But this is the team that's lost 3 of their last 4 games. That includes the heartbreaking loss to Liberty last week. That includes the heartbreaking loss to Miami just yesterday. Losing to Liberty in that heartbreaking fashion where they thought they had the game won on the blocked field goal. Turns out Justin Fuente iced the kicker, and then Liberty makes the field goal and wins the game. Then you lose by 1 point after leading by 11 late in the third to a Miami team that was very depleted. That's gut-wrenching for a team. And those type of losses, it's hard to bounce back from those. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Virginia Tech is able to bounce back from those over the remainder of the season. It's hard to believe this team was 19th in the country just a few weeks ago. Hokies are now sitting at 4-4. They still have a game against Clemson. So outside of that, they're going to have to hope to finish strong and maybe win their bowl game to try to salvage what's been a very lackluster season for them. And finally, teams trending down, South Carolina. Like Jim Harbaugh, you can probably go ahead and kiss Will Muschamp goodbye. His days in Columbia have probably come to a close. It's crazy to think that it was just a few weeks ago that South Carolina took down Auburn. That South Carolina beat Auburn who was then the 15th ranked team in the country, and the Gamecocks improved to 2-2. Well, now here they are. They've lost 3 straight games by 28 to LSU, by 45 to Texas A&M, and now they're coming off a 17-point loss to Ole Miss. Another game where if you loved offense, that was the game for you. But in the fourth quarter, late third quarter, the Gamecocks collapsed, and they are now 2-5. They still have a game against Georgia, so maybe the best they can finish is 4-6, but I'm not very hopeful for that either. So Will Muschamp probably on his way out. This was a year that he really needed to show improvement. I would have said 5-5 in this all-SEC conference slate. 5-5 probably would have been good enough, and they're going to fall well short of that goal. Teams trending up real quick. Colorado, how about that? The Buffaloes. We haven't talked much about the Pac-12 this year. They're only 2 weeks into their season. So, again, many people might criticize this pick as a team trending up, but the Buffaloes are 2-0. I had the Buffaloes going winless in Pac-12 play this year. They were supposed to be one of the worst teams, not just in the Pac-12, but maybe in the country, at least in the Power 5. You lose Mel Tucker late in the year, February, March, late in the year for college football-wise, before the preseason. You lose Mel Tucker, runs off to Michigan State. You're scrambling to find a new head coach. You settle on Carl Durrell. Okay, guy who hasn't coached in college since like the late 2000s. So we're going to bring him in there and hopefully he'll just stabilize the program. Well, the Buffaloes are 2-0. They beat UCLA, a thriller. They just beat Stanford in a thriller. They have Arizona State next week, if that game can be played. The Sun Devils have a lot of COVID cases right now, but that is also a winnable game. So the Buffaloes already surprising early in this year. Carl Durrell, even if they only win 2 games, exceeded expectations in his first year in Boulder. And that's certainly a sign of good things to come for this Buffaloes program that, again, is just a few years removed from a Pac-12 championship game and Pac-12 championship appearance. How about Virginia over in the ACC? This team is completely different when Brennan Armstrong is under center. This was a team that was 1-4 a few weeks ago. So you'll say, why is a team that is 3-4 trending up? Well, because they've won their past 2 games against North Carolina. That was a big win. And Louisville. And again, I know the Cardinals missed a lot of people. They didn't have Javian Hawkins. They didn't have Tutu Atwell. Again, all because of COVID. So I get that. But a win's a win. And they got the job done, beating the Cardinals by 14 points. Crazy thing is, after the 1-4 start, there's a chance that Virginia can finish with a winning record. Their remaining schedules against Abilene Christian, at Florida State, Boston College, and at Virginia Tech. It would not surprise me to see Virginia win their next 3 games. Even if they fall to Virginia Tech, they're 6-5, and they've salvaged a winning regular season, something that after the 1-4 start, I'm sure many didn't think was possible. So a lot of credit to Brennan Armstrong and a lot of credit to Bronco Mendenhall for rallying his troops and trying to salvage the season for the reigning Coastal champions. And then finally, Tulsa. Talked about them earlier. Let's talk on them now. We don't put many, group of 5 teams on our teams trending up or trending down, but they deserve it. They deserve it. Remember, they just beat SMU. They trailed 21-0, trailed 24-7 at half, battled all the way back to win 28-24. They have a win at Central Florida. They have the win over SMU. They're 4-1. And by season's end, they could very well have those 2 wins that we mentioned, plus a win at Houston, and maybe a win over Cincinnati. This team has a very, very good chance. They're almost a lock to me to make the American Athletic Championship game. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not they can beat Cincinnati when they get there, or if they can beat Cincinnati in that season finale, which they get to host. Remember, the Golden Hurricane get to host the Bearcats. So the American Athletic Conference race is heating up. A lot of people think it's just Cincinnati's conference to lose. Do not sleep on Tulsa. They're trending up. They're trending in the right direction. And remember, the only loss came by 9 points to Oklahoma State, a game that really, to me, was closer than the final score indicated. And that score is actually pretty dang close. So watch out for Tulsa. Philip Montgomery and his squad. They are making shockwaves across the country. They're making shockwaves throughout the American Athletic, and would not surprise me in the slightest bit if they pulled off a monumental upset against the Bearcats here in a few weeks. So guys, there you have it. Another crazy weekend of college football. Again, not the best, not the most exciting. Week 12 will provide that. Tons of huge matchups coming your way in Week 12, and we will have you covered. We're going to break down the new AP Top 25 poll on Monday. Not going to be many changes, but we're still going to break it down. We'll have our top 5 games coming your way on Tuesday. Game of the week analysis throughout the rest of the week, and then boom, Week 12, here we go. One of the best weekends of the year. You can go ahead and book it. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in that description below. Again, sign up for our expert picks. We're hitting over 60% over the past 5 weeks. We're staying hot. And we're going to stay hot as the weeks continue to go on. 53% or better by the end of the year. Can guarantee that. Tons of other extra content and offers down in that description below that you do not want to miss if you love college football. So make sure to go check that out. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.